Here he is, next-gen TSN hockey analyst Frank Corrado, fresh off the road, calling games for TSN. And we're talking about the Leafs. And what a night for the Leafs captain, Frankie. You know, it seems maybe an obvious statement, but you get that 1,000th point, and you're the 98th player in history to do so in front of your dad, in front of the crowd that you started your career with that probably secretly really, really misses you, even though they don't want to admit it. This had to have been a perfect place for him to accomplish the feat, don't you think?
Yeah, it had to be, Jay. And there's a few moments that really stick out for me in John Tavares' tenure as a Maple Leaf. First of all, being a hometown kid who decides to come home to Toronto, sign a long-term deal, and then his first year with the team scores 47 goals, scores the overtime winner last year to defeat the Tampa Bay Lightning. But what a full circle moment for him to get his 1,000th point on Long Island. A really special night for John Tavares. And, you know, the way he goes about his business, he really is the consummate professional, always trying to excel at his craft. And, you know, just there's a certain element of a grind to his game that he always seems to have. And it's really impressive the way he carries himself. You know, you think of tonight, he wins 3 or 4 really big face-offs at the end of this game that gives his team a chance to tie the game at the end. And I just think that's so indicative of John Tavares and the kind of player he is, where he's really made his bread and butter over his career down low in the offensive zone, taking cross-checks, like almost has this pit bull kind of like mentality to his game. And you know, you talk about the fans on Long Island and the disdain that they have had for him since he left. And I can't recall too many comebacks to a city for a former athlete that were as nasty and hostile as John Tavares is. And the New York crowd, the New York faithful, certainly not going to let up, even though he gets his 1,000th point tonight.
It just shows how much they loved him. I mean, if they didn't love him that much, they wouldn't be so upset. The Leafs defense continues to be a topic of conversation. I know in Leafs Nation, you know, you're missing 3 regulars. They still had some issues on Monday night. Frank, I know it's easy to say, hey, Brad Treliving needs to address this situation, but is it getting to the point where it's getting a little bit more desperate and he really does have to address this issue?
Well, Jay, 2 things can be true right now. And first of all, Brad Treliving has assembled the depth of this group, and that depth is holding up for the time being. So you have to give him some credit. You have to give the players that have been called up and thrust into this situation some credit. Saturday night, that was as complete of a game as the Leafs played all season against Nashville, and those call-up players were involved in that game very much. Now, fast forward to tonight, and there's a few moments in this game where you can see there's some defensive zone lapses, and that's where the New York Islanders are able to expose what this decor can be at times, but they find a way to get through that. They weather the storm at times in this game, and you know, there's a certain element to you can only be as good as your personnel is going to let you be. And what I mean by that is there's times where the Leafs aren't as clean as they would like to be exiting the defensive zone, and that's a personnel thing. Like, the players are still in the right spots. The forwards are still giving them options as far as where they need to be on the breakout, but you're only going to be as good as the players you have. And until that changes, there's only such high of a ceiling that this decor can have for the Leafs. So they've done an admirable job so far, these guys filling in. At some point, Brad Treliving is going to make a trade, or players are going to come back in the lineup, and that'll be the reinforcements that the team needs. But as the games ramp up here and the Leafs are playing more frequently, like there's going to be a back-to-back coming up, we're going to see like how much this decor and the depth can be exposed. But you have to give them some credit because they have played well recently.
I think you're right. Well, hey, to your point, Frankie, the overtime loss is tough to swallow, but the Leafs still have points in 6 straight games, so things are going pretty well. Frankie, stick around if you don't mind. Frankie, do you mind sticking around for a little bit?
Yeah, we'll stick around, Jay.
Okay, Frankie's going to stick around. It was a little tense there for a second because I didn't know how he was going to answer. But since Frankie is going to stick around later, I'm going to ask him about that Flames-Avalanche game on Monday night.